Morning, glory, and evening grace, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. So glad to welcome Matt Continetti to join me on a Thursday. Matt, I've got a brand new affiliate in the Outer Banks of North Carolina, 92.3 FM WZPR, where all of Salem Radio now makes its home. It's in Nag's Head. Are you a fan of the Outer Banks?
I am. I have many friends who go there. I've been there before. It's a great outlet, great new affiliate for you, Hugh. Very excited.
Now you can listen to yourself if you drive at the right time. So, Matt, I want to begin with an inside the Beltway, inside baseball stuff on nominations and then go to Israel. The inside the Beltway question is this. There are 140 plus nominees that the Democrats are not cooperating with. By this time in his administration, President Biden had 46 unanimous consent nominees. Most of these are lower level people. One is a big deal, Mike Waltz, the ambassador designate at the UN, who has a lot to do with Israel, and we'll come back to that. But the Republicans are talking about, John Cornyn mentioned it, I'll ask Lindsey Graham about it coming up, changing the rules by the nuclear option to move nominees more quickly. What do you think?
Oh, I think they're going to have to, Hugh. I think this level of obstruction is pretty unprecedented. You know, you have the blue slip process that senators have used for many years to hold up nominations. But changing the rules to cut down on debate and to force votes quicker, I think, is a way to address this lack of confirmations that's sensible, but that doesn't completely overhaul the Senate traditions and might not lead to a revolt among Republican senators as well. But I think it's overdue. And if I were Senator Thune, the majority leader, I would do it now because there's no reason to think that the Democrats will change their behavior over the August break. I would change the rule now and get as many of these nominees through as you can, and then even more when you return. There are so many political appointees now, Hugh, that I do think we have to update the process of confirming them in order to make sure that we have a functioning government.
Now, Mike Waltz is my friend, so I'm invested in that beyond that. But I also want someone at the UN to defend Israel, especially with these debates about a Palestinian state. And when we exercise the veto that we're going to exercise on whatever idiocy they do, to be as eloquent as Jane Kirkpatrick or Patrick Moynihan, that's a very high bar. I don't know if Mike can make that. But do you think that ought to be our number one priority in nominees?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we haven't had that UN ambassador for 6 months now, and Mike Waltz would be a definite improvement over the previous ambassador, the Biden's ambassador. Okay. And it's right to have a Senate-confirmed ambassador. And I think he can aspire to Moynihan and Kirkpatrick, and I know Mike too, and I think he'd be very good at the job pursuing America's interest, which involves defense of our ally, the state of Israel. And the UN has been corrupted. I mean, we know that. It's had problems from the beginning, but over the last 10 years or so, it's more and more just an arm of China and more an arm of the General Assembly, which does not have American interests in mind, wants to destroy the state of Israel entirely. And so we need a strong American presence there to fight back when the other members of the UN and the UN Security Council use that platform to spread lies and deceit about our own country and our allies.
And the UN agencies that are not being helpful to Israel in delivering aid to Gaza, he needs to be there to point that out. Now let's turn to Israel. I had a really interesting conversation with Haviv Rettig Gur yesterday, one of my favorite commentators on all things Israel with the Times of Israel, and like you, a free press columnist now, the Middle East correspondent. Haviv actually said, first time I've heard an Israeli say this, we have to prioritize destroying Hamas over the lives of the 20 hostages. Do you think that's where we are now? Because they've never been easily reconcilable. And I know how Israelis feel about the hostage taking, but right now they're incentivizing every bad actor in the world to take an Israeli hostage because of the lengths to which Israel will go to get them back. What do you think about that trade-off, Matt?
Well, I listened to that interview, Hugh. I think it's absolutely essential. I think more people need to listen to it. And what Haviv said was that it was very difficult for him to say that Israel needs to act as if the hostages were not there in order to destroy Hamas. And if it's difficult for Haviv Rettig Gur to say, it's even more difficult for me. But I do think that there's an increasing awareness among the Israeli public, and I think even in Washington, that Hamas cannot be destroyed if we allow them to hold the remaining hostages as almost a Damocles sword above Israel's head and above America's head. And so I do expect that there will be some changes in strategy coming out of this meeting today between Steve Witkoff, our emissary, and Prime Minister Netanyahu. You know, Israel controls about 75% of the Gaza Strip now. It has military control, but there's that remaining 25% where we believe the hostages are being hidden. But that's also where Hamas's remaining strength lies. And if we really want to end this war, the war will have to end in Hamas's defeat. And that might mean going in, even if we know that we're risking the lives of the hostages.
So, Matt, I think that's it's easy for me to say I'm an American, I'm not a Jew, and I've got no family or friends in the tunnels, but I don't see any other way to end this. And if there was, the Israelis who defeated Hezbollah, defeated Iran, hold the Houthis at bay, they would do it. It's just that it's 250,000 structures, 140 square miles. It's the densest patch of real estate in the world, more dense than Hong Kong and Manhattan. I think they basically have to go building to building and blow everyone up. That will not get out of their way. Are you as hardline as I am on this?
I do think that's the only way to actually get an end to the war, because what do we know? We know that Hamas has become even more entrenched in its demands. It did not accept the Israeli ceasefire proposal last week. And then in the days since, with the European governments, the UK and France and now Canada, saying that they would recognize a Palestinian state if certain conditions are not met by this autumn, Hamas has become even more entrenched. And our latest read out from Hamas is that they don't want to have any negotiations until Israel says the war is completely over. Well, the hostages are still there. So you're going to have to break this impasse somehow, and that may mean putting the lives of the remaining living hostages, some 20 people, at risk in order to destroy Hamas and end its reign of terror. And that's a very difficult decision to make, and it's the Israeli sense of morality coming from its Jewish faith, from the Jewish people's faith and sense of morality, that has complicated this situation, because Israelis care so deeply about the lives of those 20 remaining living hostages, because the Israelis want to retrieve the corpses of the some 30 corpses that Hamas is holding. They've been held back. It's the same morality that has led Israel to feed the population of the Gaza Strip, despite there being no precedent in history for one army to feed the population of the adversaries at power, the population that the adversary holds in check. But that's the ethic that Israel labors under.
Check me if you think I'm overstating this. I feel like the West is ripping apart over this, because France was expected. Macron is playing to a rising Muslim demographic. Keir Starmer, maybe he was expected because Labour's nuts. Canada has joined on the Palestinian state, but Australia? And all of a sudden, I feel like, is there a West anymore if they don't get the basic idiocy of recognizing the Palestinian state while Hamas is still living and breathing? It's just so fundamentally misguided. Is it ripping apart?
I think there's definitely cleavages. There's definitely a sense of coming apart in these past few weeks with this kind of information operation that Hamas has waged to say that there's famine and starvation in the Gaza Strip, despite there being aid that's now entering the Gaza Strip, and despite all of the publicized images of the supposed starvation being exposed as frauds and hoaxes. You see these governments changing. You know, Israel's always had to deal with opposition from its putative allies. And I think what we have here, though, despite all of this chorus of enmity from different governments, is we have President Trump in the United States remaining on Israel's side. And President Trump stating quite clearly this morning, Hugh, that the way for this humanitarian crisis to end and the way for the food to get to Gaza would be for Hamas to surrender and to release the hostages. It is that simple. It is that clarifying. And elections have consequences. And so I'm reminded that if we had President Kamala Harris, perish the thought, our government would be sounding a lot more like the UK and Canada and France, and like the half of the Democratic caucus that voted in support of Bernie Sanders' anti-Israel resolutions just the other night. That's not what we have right now. Right now, we do have a president who understands the idea of the West and does understand the stakes here and understands who's in the wrong and who's in the right.
I'm going to be back with Matt Continetti. During the break, we're going to talk about the tariffs. And then when we come back, I'm going to have Matt weigh in on the most ridiculous and at the same time telling issue of the week, the jeans issue. Don't go anywhere. I'm Hugh Hewitt. I'm back with Matt Continetti, Senior Fellow at the American Enterprise Institute in charge of domestic studies, also a columnist for Commentary, a regular contributor to the Commentary podcast. He's also a writer for the Washington Free Beacon and for Commentary. Matt, and the Free Press. Matt, I wrote a piece for Fox News today about the tariffs because I've always been a Reagan free trader. And I've always thought, nah, we don't want tariffs. Well, they took in $27 billion in June, more in July. Mr. Bessent thinks, the Secretary of the Treasury, it'll be $300 billion. I discovered that Japan doesn't let us import rice. The UK and Europe doesn't let us import beef. Was I wrong all these years? Were the Reaganauts wrong about free trade at all prices?
Well, I don't think they were wrong about free trade. And even President Reagan, as you recall, Hugh, kind of got tough with the Japanese on certain trade issues and monetary issues, much like the Trump administration has been in both its terms. What I think Donald Trump recognizes is that in this new world, the 21st century world, with the rise of China, with this revanchist Russia, you have to connect America's military interests along with our trade interests, and you need to pair them. And when you do that and you go to our partners and allies and say, look, we help you with your defenses, we need to get more from the trade relationship, well, they understand that they need our market more than we need their market. And so you've had this kind of rapid rewriting of the world trade system. And what I think is interesting is Trump has kind of moved toward arguments for tariffs that talk about adding government revenue, so ways to pay down the deficit and to pay for some of the out-of-control government spending. He talks about opening up foreign markets to our products, and so that's the non-tariff barriers you were just mentioning in terms of our agriculture or other products. And then he talks about foreign direct investment in the United States, getting other countries to invest in the United States. And with this latest deal struck with South Korea just in the past 24 hours, it's an extraordinary amount of investment that the South Koreans are pledging to put into the United States. I think with those three arguments, President Trump's trade agenda is on pretty solid political footing. And that's why I think he'll be pretty successful. He understands, unlike other presidents, just the sheer weight America has in the world trading system, and he wants to leverage that weight, that power we have, to pursue American interests. And that some of that's economic, but other parts of it have to be diplomatic as well. And so you see him punishing India with this 25% tariff because of not only India's reluctance to open up some of its markets like our other partners have, but also because India continues to buy weapons from Russia and buy energy from Russia. So Trump is unique in seeing this larger picture, I think. It's not just economics, it's also global military and global diplomacy as well.
I'm really going to look forward to the next time you and Noah are on the Commentary podcast together, because I didn't make a dent in Noah's absolutism on tariffs. So we will see. Coming right back with Matthew Continetti as he explains Sydney Sweeney for all of us. Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Matt Continetti is my guest. He is the head of domestic policy studies at AEI. He is a columnist for the Free Press, Commentary magazine columnist, Commentary podcast contributor. Matt, I'd like to blame the fact that I have all 7 grandchildren with me this week and last on my not knowing anything about Sydney Sweeney. But in fact, she's not my demo. Now, I'm told I went to a Sydney Sweeney movie and I don't remember her. I've seen the pictures. Mary Catherine Ham generously says she is a buxom blonde in the old school. Is this controversy significant, or is it a summertime story that's filling the pages that have nothing to talk about?
Well, first, Hugh, I have to say that I love this story because I love Sydney Sweeney, and any opportunity I get to think about Sydney Sweeney or comment on Sydney Sweeney, I'm going to seize. So I was happy to see that she was in the news. I was happy to see her ad. I had to watch it a few times for research purposes, of course. But what I think the broader implication is, Hugh, is that what we're seeing is that woke persists. Before the election, the journalist Mark Halperin said that if Donald Trump won, we would see a huge explosion of mental breakdowns on the left. And I think the reaction to this Sydney Sweeney American jeans ad
American Eagle.
is
Yeah.
evidence. The American Eagle jeans ad is evidence of that. To take what's clearly a pun and a kind of throwback to traditional concepts of what sells pairs of jeans as some type of Nazi coded language is insane. It's just insane. And so it's a reminder that woke hasn't left, and it's a reminder that the Democrats and their progressive allies and their far left allies are going further off the deep end. They're not swimming to shore. They're swimming further and further out to sea as we go into the Trump administration.
Do you think it's part of the reason that their very favorable rating is at 8%? Because, I mean, this is a Jordache jeans ad from when I was in college. It's not unique. It's not new. Selling jeans on beautiful women is as old as it gets. And so I was kind of stunned to learn that there are people who actually said this is Nazi when she uses jeans. It's actually eugenics. I saw one influencer on TikTok say it's eugenics. And that's just so stupid.
Well, it's also a sign of the humorlessness of the left, right?
Yes.
Sometimes, right? What did Freud say? Sometimes a cigar is just a cigar. Sometimes a pun
Yeah.
is just a pun. Sometimes you
Yeah.
just make a play on words, and you have Sydney Sweeney showing off these jeans, and she says, "Yeah, good jeans are hard to find, or there's no substitute for good jeans." So I think it's hard to draw a direct connection from this to the Democratic Party. But I think you can draw indirect connections. And the indirect connection has to do with the continued power of wokeness over the minds of so many people. And also, one other thing, Hugh, which has gone kind of undercovered, which is the media's role in this. This all started with just a few pieces online that noted this ad and then noted a few commenters on social media getting angry out of that. And from this very thin material, these reporters were able to kind of spin an entire narrative that we're still talking about. So it's not just the kind of mindlessness of the far left. It's also, I think, the media's attraction to stories that kind of sensationalize, divide us, and kind of try to tear everything that normal people think is good into something that's bad. But I will not stand for it, and I will continue to defend Sydney Sweeney for as long as I'm still standing.
I was reminded, I actually saw a Sydney Sweeney movie with the fetching Mrs. Hewitt called It's Not You. And I was reminded that I hated the movie. I don't remember her. I don't remember her. Maybe you've got it on a continual loop at the Continetti house, but I don't
I don't
remember
know
her
how
in
we
any
could
movie.
forget. I don't think I've seen a single one of her movies, and yet I know who she is,
You
and
know who she
I
is.
follow her career closely, nonetheless.
So I want to close by telling you about the journalist dilemma, which is August. Here it is, July 31, and we're heading into the long weekend, the first weekend of the deadly doldrums of August. Will there be any news in August, Matt Continetti? Any real news other than Israel and Gaza, which was ongoing war, and maybe Russia and Ukraine?
Well, I think you just hit on it, Hugh. I do think there will be news in August, and I think it will have to do with Russia and Ukraine. President Trump shortened the deadline he gave to Vladimir Putin to reach an agreement or else face secondary sanctions and other types of sanctions in response. I think the deadline now is August 8th. And if I'm not mistaken, it was sometime in August 2008, around that time, when Russia launched its invasion of the Republic of Georgia back in 2008. So August often has moments of big news, even though we assume it's a kind of a sleepy time. And that news often, it seems to me, at least as I've been covering politics, is tied to Russia and to Putin. So that's where I would
Now,
keep my eye on in the coming weeks.
You mentioned earlier that President Trump has imposed a sanction on India for buying Russia oil and Russia weapons. Is that, in your view, a secondary sanction, a secondary boycott of the sort that really bites?
Well, it's a tariff, so he's levying the tariff for that purpose. It's not quite as far-reaching as the secondary sanctions that we would see if, say, the Blumenthal-Graham bill that's in the Senate with overwhelming support passes. So Trump has said that he'd impose the punishing tariff on Russia. Of course, we don't actually import all that much from Russia, so that wouldn't have the same effect as this bill that's out there in the Senate. But I do think that if Putin responds to this additional deadline in the way that he's responded to all the others, which is to simply continue the war, to continue to launch his attacks, his indiscriminate attacks on civilian populations in Ukraine, Trump might consider supporting that Senate bill. He might support further sanctions on the banking sector. And let's not forget, he's already arranged this deal to sell weapons to NATO, which would then turn them over to Ukraine. So I think a more concerted effort to help Ukraine, to punish Russia, and to also help Ukraine dig in so it can survive this summer offensive. I think that will get Putin's attention, and it will also be the best for America's security and for Ukraine's security, too.
A last question. The EU deal committed the EU to buying hundreds of millions of dollars of American weaponry. Our defense industrial base can't even meet our needs, Matt Continetti. Do you think you're going to see an expansion of plant and capacity in the United States in the munitions and shipbuilding arena quickly?
I do, and I think some of that is from government, but I think a lot of it is from the private sector. These new firms, things like Anduril, things like Palantir, other new firms, smaller firms that are coming on. They need that investment. I think they can expand. They just need that capital that this deal might help give them.
Matt Continetti, thank you. Follow Matt on X at Continetti.